Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and talk to amazing humans about their journey with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Sarah Adlam to the conversation. Welcome, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, lovely to see you. As I always do, just brief introduction, how I know Sarah, and then I'll let Sarah, you can do the full introduction to who you are and what you do. But Sarah and I met last year during lockdown in a virtual training room for mental health first aid. And Sarah was one of the delegates that was participating in one of the first online virtual mental health first aid training sessions I had the privilege and the pleasure to deliver. Stood out and was a wonderful delegate, of course, as everybody who comes on those trainings is a great delegate. So it was lovely to stay in touch. The podcast recordings were coming around. I was talking to people who have got wonderful stories and experiences, and Sarah's one of those. So I'm so looking forward to just getting into a conversation with you, Sarah, about your journey. So I'll pass it over to you. Please tell people who you are and what you do.
Thank you. So I'm Sarah Adlam. I am the manager of 2 Virgin Actives. I live in West London and I've spent most of the last year on furlough, hence why I had the opportunity to go on your course,
Yep.
which was actually self-funded. It was something I did out of my own interest to help support a family member, well, my dad most specifically, but also to kind of aid my leadership at work and be able to work better with my employees, etc., coming out of furlough. With the, particularly then, I don't think I was that aware of how long it was going to be.
Yeah.
You could see immediately the anxiety. It really hit me when we went into lockdown. I was terribly anxious for a good couple of weeks over what was coming, and it was something that I felt I really needed to help my team and my family members through. So yeah, that's kind of who I am and why I took an interest into mental health, or more specifically, it kind of catapulted my interest in helping people experiencing poor mental health, really.
Brilliant. And you're a great advocate to it. And I know you're supporting lots of people and from a personal perspective as well. So well done. You keep going with that journey as well. It's a journey. It doesn't have a destination, of course, just keep learning and supporting people. The big question then. So let's go through a little bit more about who you are, who Sarah is, your journey with mental health. Now you define what that means to you, but tell us a story, tell us and share with us a little bit about who you are and what you've been through, all your experiences.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a long story to tell
Let's
you.
Go for it. Let's go.
I'll try and keep it short. I think back when I was a teenager, there wasn't much awareness on mental health whatsoever.
Yep.
I think I've always struggled with anxiety. I wouldn't say struggled with anxiety. I think anxiety is a part of who I am. Okay. If you don't mind what we've shared before, whether you've got to do something continuously, I always need to be awake. I always need to be working and doing something. And I've got that natural, it's kind of, I call it my get up and go, because that's what drives me every day, to quash the anxiety, is get things done. So that's always been a big part of me. Yeah. My mum would say she worries about worrying, or she'd worry that she doesn't have anything to worry about. And that's how she kind of sees my anxiety, as I'm a worrier. Is something going to go wrong? I'll make it go right. Which I don't mind, and I think I would actually miss that part of my personality if it was quashed. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it's part of who I am. So I guess some people could become quite overwhelmed. And there's been experiences in the past where I have been overwhelmed, but whether that's just being overworked or taking too much on, and having to know to take, and I'm quite good at that, where I think, right, actually now I need to take some rest, or I go on holiday as often as I can, because my idea of utopia is lying on a beach. So and then I turn my phone off and I have no contact with the world. I think I saw you did that at one point. You cut off all social media, etc.
Yeah.
That one holiday is a big thing for me, and I don't feel anxious about that. That's my kind of reward for what I work for.
Yep.
Strangely, I guess I most became aware of mental health. I think everything, actually, going back when when I was first going into, I worked for a council run leisure centre, and there was very limited awareness. Everything was kind of channeled into stress. And I think doctors might do that quite often. If someone presents being depressed or anxious, they'd be signed off with stress. And it became quite a negative connotation, you know, to say that that person's off with stress. And that's kind of how, that was my first kind of experience of mental health, and actually understanding, actually, why are they off work? What is the underlying issue? And trying to get an understanding of that, but without any kind of education. It was quite hard to have those conversations, but I've always tried to get an understanding for the people that I'm working with or are working for me, to encourage good mental health, really. But until I went on your course, that was when I had a good awareness of how to approach those conversations, you know? But more specifically, 10 years ago, my dad had a stroke, and he spent 2 years in a coma. Well, he was in and out of a coma the first year, and the second year he was kind of heavily sedated. There was a lot of pressure on his brain, and it was trying to remove the pressure. My dad was a karate sensei, so he'd gone, and he was 45 at the time. So karate sensei had a stroke, and my stepmom left him in the hospital. So she said she didn't want to, she knew he was going to be disabled, and that's not what she signed up to. And so that's the conversation that we had 10 years ago. At which point I was the next of kin, and I was the eldest daughter, and I kind of felt as if all that responsibility had been passed on to me, which I was happy to do. You know, it was my dad. So I supported him through a couple of years of that, and nearly lost my job because I had to take quite a bit of time off. But the doctor that I spoke to, when I, you know, explained what I was going through, because I did feel really unwell going into work, knowing that my dad was in hospital, I really struggled with that. Just to not be at my phone and know that he hasn't, you know, if he's woken up, I needed to have my phone with me constantly in case someone called, and he was in hospital in Oxford. So I think there was someone said, and it was a comment, and it was quite underhand, but it was, why can't they put her dad in a wheelchair and be done with it? I went to the doctor and I said, look, you know, I've got to focus on my dad, but I've got to go to work and I can't do both things. And this is quite funny. She signed me off with stress at the time. But maybe I was stressed. I think I was very anxious, and you know, really wanted to be there to support my dad. And then when he did come round, obviously there was the having to deal with his loss of mobility. So he's paralysed, loss of a job, loss of his wife. And then also it became pretty obvious that his brain wasn't functioning in quite the same way. You know, you could have a conversation with him, but he'll have a completely different conversation. And you know, he might ask you a question, but he won't listen to the answer. So there was different things like that. For a couple of years, he was in hospital in a rehab facility. And then fortunately, he got a flat, which isn't local to me, which was quite frustrating because I still do the commute quite often. But so then he started to present with psychosis. So I really struggled at that point, because I think for the whole family, it was great. He's out, he's learning to walk. You know, he can walk a couple of 100 meters now. Mostly he's in the wheelchair, but he can make a cup of tea by himself. So all these things were like great bits of progress from the fact that he'd been in a coma and we thought we were going to lose him to right now he's self-sufficient, to he started to really suffer with psychosis. And his experience, that he wouldn't mind me sharing, is he feels that the government are coming to get him, or police, and wherever he looks out the window or whatever, there's a police car there, even though it's an ordinary car. And I found it really, and I definitely dealt with it completely the wrong way. And I will put my hands up to that, but I had absolutely no training or experience with this.
Yeah, sure.
And I was really angry. So he tried to attempt suicide, and he slit his throat, and then did press ups to try and speed up the process.
Right. Okay.
And the reason he did that is because he thought people were coming to murder him, and he wanted to win. So that was, it wasn't depression, it was just complete psychosis.
Yeah.
That he wanted to kill himself first before someone else could win. And I think that came from, he's quite a winner and mentality of karate, and I'm the strongest and no one will kill me. I'll kill myself before you can. But yeah, so I was really angry because my younger brother found him, called the ambulance. So that, I think we can't account for the trauma that my younger brother went through.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and I was really angry. We had a new baby on the way in the family, and I just felt that he was being very selfish, because we'd come so far to help get him into his house, to get him self-sufficient, and I just didn't understand the psychosis. I just thought he was saying, I've had enough of life, I don't want to be here anymore. And I really, really struggled with that. And so then once he was hospitalized, that helped somewhat, because it would get to the point where he would try and involve me in the psychosis. So he would think I was his lawyer.
Right.
So
okay.
he wouldn't talk to me as his daughter. He would say, right, you're the lawyer. I need you to take notes of what they're doing in this hospital. And so I said to the nurse, what do I do? Do I go along with it? She was like, no, absolutely no way. You just try to understand, listen to him, and keep reminding him of who you are. But if you did anything that contradicted his scenario, if you challenged anything he was saying, it was very violent.
Yeah.
He would be sedated. We'd have to lock the doors. I'd be asked. It got to the point where the nurses couldn't handle him. They would call me to come in to try and calm him down, which was really, really sad. The worst experience was he kept his hand on the buzzer because he thought something was coming through the light. So he kept his hand on this buzzer, which was the emergency alarm. So he refused to remove his hand from the emergency alarm. So this whole hospital has got flashing blue lights coming up to say there's an emergency in this room, and I'm there trying to encourage him to
take your hand off. Yeah.
I said, and he's right, you cover the light switches. And so I said, right, I'll cover the light switches if you take your hand off that. It was like this sound like negotiation going on to just stop the emergency alarm. But at that point, the nurses were threatening to throw him out of the hospital because they just said we can't look after everyone. So yeah, it's been quite a roller coaster with him, because then he comes back and he's absolutely fantastic, and he'll say, I'm so sorry, I was in, and he'll say it, he's very detrimental about himself, but he'll say, I was in cloud cuckoo land, I won't go there again, I'm so sorry. But another thing that I didn't realize, and I think it was highlighted by the course that I went on, was he used to drink. So he got put on all this medication for psychosis, but he would always sneak a little beer. And I guess I was an enabler at that point, because my aunt, who is the sister, so she's the other kind of next carer, she would say, right, he's not drinking. If I find out he's been drinking, I'm not going to do his shopping anymore.
Yeah.
She'll say things like that. And then my dad would say, come on, Seth, how great will it be to go to the pub, take me in my wheelchair. And I didn't realize that I was doing any harm.
No.
I didn't realize that it was impacting these medicines and how bad it was, actually. And no one had told me. I thought my aunt was coming from the point of view that she's a non-drinker.
Right, okay,
and I was coming from the point of view that, well, he's very lonely. He spends much of his time on his own. He's not drinking at home. He wants to go out for one beer. I'll take him out for one beer. If that's making him happy and giving him a bit of a quality of life that he enjoys. And he always used to enjoy a beer, even when he was a karate instructor. Yep. It was one of his, definite weaknesses. So I thought it was absolutely harmless. But to realize then that I was enabling this addiction, and then it got to the point where he was sneaking off. He has a scooter. So he's sneaking off to go and get his own beer. Which I didn't know about. So it was quite sneaky, actually. But yeah, so that then triggered another bout of psychosis, which meant he ended up back in hospital again. But yeah, so again, it was exactly the same scenario. Tried to kill himself again. My brother found him. But it's just scary that it's not a cry for help when it happens. It is, he's not trying to reach out to anybody. It's, I need to die quickly. And we've just been very fortunate that my little brother spends so much time there.
Yeah.
That he's been in and out around about the time we found him, so really lucky in that sense. Yeah. But he has no awareness of what why he's doing it. He just thinks he has to kill himself before someone else kills him. So yeah, I think very scary. Very little is known about psychosis, I think, in terms of, what triggers it, where it comes from, how he can get better as well. I found that really, really sad that he's just piled on medication after medication. And the way it's kind of been, I don't know if it's right or wrong, but what the doctors said to me is that the synapses, they're not meeting. They're never going to meet because of the trauma he's had with the stroke. Right. So it's more of a physical than it was produced by his own hormones or whether therapy could work. They don't think so because it's literally the synapses. So we can't talk the synapses back together is what. But to me, that just seems quite a lazy approach, because he's still dosed up on antidepressants, now antipsychotics. I think he takes, 30 medications a day.
That's a lot.
He's highly functioning though now. He's more aware than he's ever been. He's really progressing quite well, has decent conversations. Yeah. But yeah, I'm just surprised he's got through the lockdown without incident, because given his paranoia, and he spends all day at home watching the news or TV or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
So could you imagine what his experience could have been about this coronavirus?
Yeah.
But we go on holiday once a year, so it's his treat to me, which is quite sweet. So once a year we go away together. Well, I'm his carer when we go away together, but it's still a treat, to get a free holiday.
Yeah.
So we go to some lovely places, but that's what he's mostly obsessed about at the moment, is monitoring the red, amber, green list.
Oh, really? Yep.
Yeah. So he's desperate to go to Costa Rica. So last night I got a text with a photo of Costa Rica is on the red list. He's like, this is devastating. So, but I think we've got equal. I think that's, for both of us, is a big thing for us to go on holiday and really relax and enjoy ourselves. So I just have to make sure he doesn't drink.
True. Yeah, don't go all inclusive. Try and avoid.
No, exactly. I can't enable him any more than I have done in the past.
No, of course.
But big learning, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it sounds like you've been through some serious challenges there with your dad, and obviously ongoing as well, to make sure that he stays sort of in that safe zone, I guess, is sort of a way to look at it, isn't it? How have you felt with your mental health throughout that experience? I know you mentioned about the stress and being signed off, but have you sort of had moments where it's been quite challenging, and how would you define that?
I became quite aware of, I think, when my dad was first, in hospital, and I became this real busy bee, I had to go to work, get to my dad, spend 8 hours with him, and I'd feel really, really anxious about him being there on his own.
Sure.
And I don't know where it comes from, but I have a real fear of that, I think. I have a real fear of prisons. It's very strange. Hospitals, I think anywhere that you are controlled.
Yep.
You can't just get up and walk out. I don't know. It's isolated to those two things. I couldn't bear it if a member of my family went to prison.
Right.
And I'm exactly the same if they go to hospital. I am, as you know, there to see them, to look after them, and it's really crazy actually. I don't know where it comes from.
Sure.
But I became quite aware of that when that happens with my dad, and it must be this anxiety to control and make sure people feel safe or whatever it is. But I don't know. I think it was very hard in the first instance because my dad, who became no longer the guy that he was.
Yeah.
And he was very cool, you know. Me and my best friends used to sit and marvel at him because he would try and teach us how to do a handstand and a double kick backwards in case we were being attacked in an alley.
Oh, right. As you do, yeah.
Yeah. We'd be like, it's okay, we're just going to avoid the alleys.
Yeah.
So he went from being this really cool, trendy dad to being, well, in a coma, and it was quite overnight, you know, life-changing for us.
Yeah.
But I think on the whole, we as a family, it brought some of us together.
Okay.
The ones that wanted to assist and help. You know, me and my aunt became very close. Me and my younger brother, who's from the second marriage, so he's my half brother. We became really close over it. And then the others, you know, you can see who will pull themselves away from a situation, which is quite interesting. But I think I learned a lot about myself and a lot about different members of my family in terms of support networks and who's there for you when you actually need them. You know, even my mum, she was great. She came to the hospital, and she was his ex-wife, you know. She came up to the hospital with me. She spent a lot of time at hospital, and she still comes on, not all the time, but once or twice, you know, a year, she'll come with me to see my dad, to check on him, to check on his health, which was nice. It's really quite nice. And it's nice to see them together after all those years, you know, and he can still reminisce or remember. Yeah. And so he's got all those memories, which must be quite frustrating for him, really, to have all the memories of fantastic times and to be so limited in what he can and can't do now. But yeah, I think for me, I think I channel everything into anxiety. I've had therapy before where she definitely said that I experience most emotions as anxiety. So I rarely get angry or sad. It's just, oh, what do I need to do about that? And, you know, heart racing and palpitations, and until I've resolved a problem or the argument is over, or, you know. So,
interesting.
And then I think I spoke before about when my thyroid stopped working. Well, I don't think it stopped completely working, but I'm on a really high dosage of medication. And one of the side effects of that was depression. Right. But it all coincided at the same time as my dad had come out of hospital, was being hospitalized. Right. So at first I thought I was depressed, and I really struggled with that because I didn't tell anybody, and I wouldn't, you know. I went and spoke to my doctor because I was really worried about how much I was sleeping. And I'm a workaholic, so I'm happy to go to bed at midnight, wake up at 5, go to work all day, do 12, 14 hours, you know, drive by my dad, check he's okay, go home. But all of a sudden I was sleeping for hours upon hours. And I didn't want to go and see my dad. I didn't want to try and squeeze in a night out, or at one point I didn't even want to go to work. And that was, well, that's about 5 years ago now. And I was doing quite a big job across the country. And the doctor very quickly said, you're depressed. And then I read up everything about depression and became the expert and ticked every boxes. You know, this is me. When I think a lot of it was down to this tiredness that I was experiencing because my thyroid wasn't working. Right. Yeah. So once my thyroid got diagnosed and that, you know, my medication balanced out, I started to feel really well again. So I don't know, maybe I did go through a period of depression, or maybe it was just a side effect that pushed me into a period of depression. But it was, it was a very scary time for me because I'm not used to feeling low. Like I said, I feel everything is just sort it out, do it, move on. Yeah. but to feel really low and tired and not want to do anything or go anywhere. And it was for a period of a year.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Trying to go to work and not tell people how I was feeling. So
how did you function for that year? How did it come out? Was it just high functioning? You were able to just get on and do the normal job, or
it was like dragging myself through mud,
right?
I think. And I spent the whole year feeling like I'm drowning in mud. There's glass around me. I can't. And I was on antidepressants as well. So I was given antidepressants for that year before my thyroid. And when I went on that, it came off. But it was a really tough year. And I remember I booked a therapist because I couldn't get therapy from the NHS. It was just such a delay. And I think in nature, I've been diagnosed with something, I must fix myself. So I need therapy, right? So I then went and spent a fortune on a fantastic, and she was brilliant, actually, this therapist. But an example of how I got through the year is I booked her at 7 a.m. every Monday morning to kickstart my week.
Right, got you.
I knew that I had to go and see her because I was paying a fortune for her. And then I thought, this was my fixing. So if I go and see her, discuss everything with her, then I can get through this working week and set goals to get through that working week to then go and see her the next week. So that was my own goal. So it got to the point though at the end of the year that I started to feel, and that's when I thought I was getting better, because I started to become more curious about her.
Okay.
And also jealous because she had this beautiful house.
Oh, really? you didn't move in with her then?
Yes, and I thought maybe I need to become a psychotherapist and buy this beautiful house. And so at that point I thought, and I'd started my thyroid medication, that I realized that actually I'm feeling 100 times better. So I can't really tell what that was. I'd say it was the worst year ever, but not triggered by anything that I can tell you. Maybe it was just my mum had the same experience with her thyroid when she was exactly the same age as me.
Okay. Yeah.
But she often has to coach me because everything that happens with my mum happens with me at the same age. It's been like this pattern. Yeah. I got really paranoid at one point, thinking, but what if I have a stroke too? If I've got, and I look exactly like my dad and I look exactly like my mum, so it's a bit bizarre. So I figured, I went through this phase where I was like, if I've got this thyroid from you, what if I've got this stroke from me? And then I'm Googling everything to make sure I never have a stroke.
Yeah.
So if I've got a blood clot, or I can feel one, or I think there's a pulse in my leg, I'll sit and rub it for about an hour thinking, no, that I'm definitely not going to have a stroke.
and that's not anything to do with anxiety at all there, right, Sarah?
Yeah, well, I guess it all comes out in anxiety.
Yeah,
still not there.
Sounds like it is. Oh my gosh, it's incredible. I find you fascinating, and it's incredible that you've got such awareness of, and obviously you've been through experiences, and I love the fact that you're talking openly about these things as well. And thank you so much for doing that. I really do genuinely mean that, because it helps people to realize that, normal, everyday people who go about everyday, jobs in life and doing normal things, sometimes these things come across us, and we have these struggles or these worries or these things going on. And, sometimes the diagnosis is depression, and we should never hide behind the thought of saying, I have this diagnosis. But of course, within your situation, there was other factors in play as well, which, thankfully got found and was able to help you to recover from those. But it is, I just love listening to people tell these stories, honestly, Sarah. We're coming towards the end of this, believe it or not. You didn't think you could fill 30 minutes of talking to me, right? And you've done amazing. I'm gonna pass it to you just to say sort of any final thoughts or comments you want to share, maybe about what's going on for the future, some of your thoughts around that as well, if you've got any. So thank you from me first, and then I'll just pass it over to you. Any thoughts, words of wisdom, anything you want to say?
No, I think this platform is really, helpful at generating the conversation, because I would never have told anybody, and I very rarely do. And during the period where I was diagnosed with depression, I didn't open up to a single person, not work, not my family, and I was very embarrassed myself by the stigma, and being quite, I'm a workaholic. I love working. That's what I do, is what I'm known for. But it's very hard then to say to people, actually, I'm suffering with depression, or I'm really struggling right now. And yeah, I kept it really to myself. But potentially, I'm trying to think, if had I had so much awareness at that point, would I have had more conversations about it? I don't know, but I think having this conversation is really healthy for me, because I'm finally able to talk about it, and it is really important. I think that when people are suffering or struggling, that they do reach out, because that, still to this day, I tend to only share my experiences with people that are sharing experiences or how they are feeling, and they ask, have you felt like this before? And only then do I feel able to have that conversation, so that people know that they're not alone, that every person does experience mental health in some shape or form. And I think every person has a story to tell, so keep doing your podcast, because I think you could get up to number 1 million if you carry on.
Oh gosh, I might be a bit old by then. I'm I've got no intentions to park it, so it's still going to continue. Thank you. That's very kind of you to say that as well. And we, by sharing our stories, we encourage others to do the same, and that is so important in all of this. And you've told your story, and you've put your side across, and that's nice to be able to do that. And that's ultimately what I want this to be, is just for you to have that chance to do it and to say things out loud, to maybe the first time you said them in this sort of forum. But you've been brilliant. You really have. You're an amazing human. As I say to all the people that come on here, and it's only reserved for those special ones that do participate in podcast recordings with me, of course. But you are an amazing human, and I just want to wish you all the very best, Sarah, with everything. And looking forward to, I know you're back at work now. I know that's come back, but just say a huge thank you to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
I love the background noise, and that's not my computer for anybody that's listening, by the way.
Sorry.
I think that's Sarah's
mine,
that keeps making those little binging announcements. As I do always close these, just to say just a couple of words, just to say, if you are struggling, if you do need to talk to somebody, know there is always somebody out there that is there to listen. And you can reach out to Sarah or I if you've got any conversations, comments about any of the subjects that we've covered in this session, this podcast, or know that places like Samaritans exist today, safe space for you to be able to talk freely about what you're going through, any of those worries or concerns. You can call 116 123, or you can text the shout 85258. Please do know you're not alone. You really aren't alone. So please stay safe, everybody. Look after yourselves. Sarah, thank you so much. It's lovely to see you again. Look after yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you.